Hello and welcome back to Neuro Chatting. I'm Sharon Jackson and I'm joined today by...
Hi, I'm Aisha.
And hi, I'm Leanne.
And we're going to be chatting today about all things care. So who cares? Yeah, I mean, it's a big one, that, isn't it? Who cares? Everybody.
Yeah.
What were you...
Or do we
say? Yeah. Yeah, or do we? Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yes, everyone cares when you get diagnosed. The person being diagnosed, they care the most because they're afraid of what's next to come. They're afraid of, they just have these fears. So yes, they care about their condition, but then those fears get transferred to your family members. And then it's about them caring. And not everyone takes that news the same way. Some people care a bit more than others, so it's just relative. Yes, that aspect is very relative. That who cares?
For you, Aisha, because obviously there's different timescales of how you became a carer. You obviously learned at a very young age that your mum had Alzheimer's. Then it was later. I think you said you were 21 when your dad got his diagnosis of Parkinson's. How did it change in terms of thinking about care from when you learned about your mum to learning about your dad, and how did your role sort of change as well? Because it must have changed quite profoundly.
Yeah. Okay, so when my mum was diagnosed, I was about 10 or 11 years old. So it was a very alien concept for me that all of a sudden my mum had forgotten all of us. And she sort of remembered my other two siblings, my older sisters, but she had no recollection of me being the youngest child. So for the first 6 or 8 months, it was very difficult for her to recognize us. And I would give credit to my dad for being very patient with her and showing her those photographs that, we had grown as a family. So, my dad was very caring with my mum, and I was very confused then. I mean, this was a major thing happening at home, and I was still at school, and my friends were, doing all those girly things, talking about boy bands and having those
Anyone
parties.
in particular?
I can't remember now. And talking about TV shows, and I never got to do that because I didn't have time at home. So in terms of caring, that's another dimension. I clearly remember there was this one time I was unable to do my homework, and my teacher was very disappointed in me. And she asked me in front of everyone that, why didn't you do your homework? It's incomplete and you've never done this. You've never behaved this way before. And I was very upset that day because something over the weekend had happened of course, with my mum. And I said that, I forgot. And someone from the class said, did you forget like your mom? Because you're always going on like my mom, you're always frustrated or upset that your mom doesn't remember. So did you forget like your mom? And I was shocked because the teacher didn't intervene, and she thought it was funny that I was upset about the fact that my mom couldn't remember, and that it was a thing, it was a valid reason for me not to do my homework. And then she thought I was replicating my mom's behavior to get away with stuff. So I didn't do my homework, and to get away with it, I was just saying that I forgot. And that is, I would say, that's one milestone I'll never forget, because that day I came back home, I was very upset, and that was the day my dad told me that, they don't know your mom, so they don't care, and it's okay that people outside don't care, but we need to care because she's our mom. And that gave me a new perspective on care, and that was one of the first lessons I learned regarding care. But then eventually when my sisters moved out, I was about 15 when my sisters moved to the UK, and now I had this entire responsibility on myself, and I knew it was a really, really difficult job. And yes, it was very hard to manage life as a teenager, life as a carer, and life as a responsible daughter. And it was difficult managing those three identities. But I tried to navigate through life, but still I was, this teenager, and I tried, initially I used to try and hide this fact that, I have such a dysfunctional life at home. And yes, I remember I used to hide it, and sometimes I used to be ashamed about it because that's not normally what I used to see. I used to see my friends hanging out with their parents attending school meetings, and going out together as a family for dinner or for coffee. And I just couldn't do that because my mother used to just forget that we were outside. But I'm so glad that my dad was really patient with her, and then she got re-familiarized with those spaces that we used to go to together as a family. So that transitionary period was rough when I was a teenager, and obviously being the youngest and with all the responsibility, I thought I was a victim because suddenly I was the adult in the house, and things got difficult. I mean, from just going to college, now studies were really difficult, and I used to be really bright at school. I used to be a high achiever, and I just wasn't performing in college. And just coming back home and your mom telling you, aren't you late for school? Because she just didn't remember. And some days she just wouldn't remember that I'm a teenager now. So it was really difficult, and managing to give her care around that time was very challenging. And again, I would give my dad all the credit because he was patient with her initially, and then he was really, really patient with me because he understood what I was going through. And he understood that I had all this responsibility on me after my sisters had left. And my sisters didn't care because they had lives of their own. And yeah.
It was really hard for you.
Yes, it was. Yes, but I'm glad that time is over. I'm glad I could have been much worse.
What would have helped you back then? If you could think of something that would have helped you, what would it be?
People realizing that Alzheimer's is a real condition. People realizing that physically you can look normal, you can appear normal, but that does not mean that you have the right, you can think in a linear manner, or you can talk capacity. Normally. Yeah, you're very articulate. That's not normal. And society does not realize that.
So do you think it's worse from the culture you were used to compared to, say, what we think of as the way we do things here, which isn't always brilliant, but is it different, do you think, here, or would it have been different?
Well, I'd say here it's much better because there's a lot of awareness, but at the same time I'd say that I have family living here for over 50, 60 years now, and they're okay when they're here, but when they back there in Pakistan or when they're back home, they just how people over there are.
So they slot back into how things are there.
Yeah.
So it's very different.
Very.
Where you're.
Yeah.
And you said in a previous podcast that there's like a real stigma around neurological and mental health because it's seen as a rich person's kind of, because it's invisible, and so therefore that's not got the sort of, I suppose, investment into treatments within Pakistan culture, and so it's seen that way. And yeah, when you tell that story about how children were almost like, how you were made fun of, and that way you can almost, I think that sort of puts that into perspective a little bit about how the culture sort of recognises or sees and perceives neurological conditions. It's awful.
It is, yes. And this is family I'm talking about. My mum's dad is still around, and my mum has had this diagnosis for a very long time, and he doesn't respect her. He doesn't respect her opinion because he thinks she's mad, and he's told this to her multiple times. He dismisses her opinion, and it's been ages that he speaks to her directly about important stuff. He'll just bypass her opinion or her being, and just talk to us about everything important.
So there's a huge. We in a previous podcast we talked a little bit about spontaneity and other people, and so in a way, the experience you've had as a carer or watching your mum needing care, you've seen the worst elements of that as a result of other people's behaviour and thoughts, which is quite shocking, really. But other people's behaviour and thoughts are very powerful things, aren't they? Very destructive sometimes, but obviously can be very positive as well. I feel very, very sad that you've had that experience.
Yeah.
I think it does bring up this point, though, that, like you're saying, I think we have, and we said this in a previous podcast as well, where there's this sort of perception that family will automatically just sort of knuckle down and care and have your back, and actually sometimes that's not the case. Quite often families splinter and fall apart, and that's really, really tragic, because when you think about care and when you think about when the chips are down, you just automatically think that your family's ones that's going to have your back, and that's not always the case when it comes to neurological conditions and disability.
I just don't understand it a lot of the time. I can remember when I was first diagnosed, my parents separated when I was really young, and so I didn't have a relationship with my dad, so to speak. But I remember that he rang me in the hospital when I just had my diagnosis. My mum had told him I'd been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. He rang me, and his first words to me were, "How have you got that?" And I just thought, oh, go away. That's kind of stuck with me. I thought, I mean, that was it. I didn't expect anything else. I didn't expect a phone call. I didn't expect anything, because I didn't even think to tell him. My mum had told him. As I'm the oldest in my siblings, and I'd always been the one who was kind of in charge, if you will. But my mum shifted her allegiance when I was diagnosed, because I think she kind of thought that I wasn't going to be up to it anymore. So I was kind of sidelined a bit. Wasn't very obvious perhaps to other people. It was very obvious to me. It was just the way that she was, and I'm not saying that she didn't love me or care, but the way she expressed her caring a lot of the time was to tell me ways that I could be cured. So she would hear something on the news and ring me up and say they found a cure. And I would try to explain to her, well, that's, there are so many different types of condition, and it's not always going to be relevant for that. Oh, but it said they're going to cure people. I said, well, they're going to try, but they're not going to cure people. They can't take away something that's already there. The damage has been done. What do you mean the damage? She didn't really understand it, and she found it really difficult. So that's from that perspective, really, of a child being diagnosed. My mum just panicked, and I think I've looked at it over the years. I think in her mind, I think she probably thought she'd done something. Maybe it was her fault. Maybe she felt responsible because...
Yeah, quite often mums do that, actually. There's lots of research that shows that
it's my
parents
fault.
To children who've got maybe complex needs, or they think the mother often takes it on thinking, is it something I did wrong? Did I do something? And often it's nothing to do with that. It's just that sometimes people are born with certain things, or we can be...
That's right. There are advances all the time, aren't there, in medical science, and they're discovering things all the time, and so we will find stuff out. But I think that it's interesting, that word care, isn't it? Because I'm sure my mum did care, I'm not so sure that my dad did. I think he didn't care that I'd had a successful career or I'd achieved things in my job, or that didn't seem to be relevant. He just cared that somehow or other I'd got this, and how had I done it? You know, I'd have gone, had it been something I'd done. And caring is really hard. I mean, as a parent, you're caring for a small child, and nobody tells you how to do that. You don't get a guidebook, do you? You just have to go with it and hope that you don't do anything to kill them, you know, just do the best you can. Make sure that you keep them, you know.
Keep them alive.
You keep them alive, you know, you just like do your very best. And when my mum was getting older, I did do a lot of caring for her before I was diagnosed, is what I had. And then I think, I don't know, it's hard. I had to take on a bigger caring role when my husband was diagnosed with cancer, because it was massive for us as a family, and he, you know, he needed me then more than, and I'd needed him, and he'd looked after me, and now it was my turn, and I found it frustrating trying to look after him but also manage myself. And you know, you think about things afterwards, don't you? And we had a dog who was quite old, and the dog had dementia. I'm going to say that I had something, and it was incontinent. But I was looking after the dog and looking after him, and I hadn't got it in me to do what should have been done with the dog in terms of taking it to the vet. It was just something I pushed on one side because I had enough to think about, thinking about him. And I, you know, and you go through all the things of, what is he going? He's going to die. He'll die.
The dog or
my husband.
Your husband.
And the dog, every morning I would get up and there'd just be mess, and I'd have to clean this mess up, and it was hard for me to clean that mess up because sometimes I don't have the energy to get on the floor, and it was just rubbish. But I felt catapulted into that role of carer without a plan, and there isn't a plan, is there?
In many ways, you see that from the outside looking in. It's almost like you're catapulted into that as well with your mum, and and that's so often the case with care. Like you're just or with neurological conditions with disability, at times you're just catapulted into a situation and you have to just kind of sink or swim, and both of you chose to swim, but not everybody does.
No, and it's hard because I think we've talked about this before, Aisha, about this thing, and I said, oh well, when someone's diagnosed in the family and it's something, or it's established that someone within a family unit is going to need some sort of care, everybody's job changes. And you said, you know, the job doesn't just change, you're given a new one, and you are, aren't you, really? Yeah. So it's something you might have known and been used to. You suddenly got this new job, and you don't get to choose it. You don't get to choose the hours you work or the conditions under which you work. And it's like, if you can imagine that in a workplace, it just wouldn't happen, would it? No. But yet it's the same thing, and the dynamics of your family must change hugely.
Yeah,
I think that.
Yeah. I think everyone goes through this identity crisis. I felt that I was mothering my parents. I had taken on that role. I was the adult. And my parents sometimes thought that I was too overpowering, but yes, I had to be like that to make things work, to cater to both of their needs. I had to make very strict decisions, harsh decisions. Someone once told me, you have to be cruel to be kind.
Yeah.
So yes, I do get blamed a lot for doing those things, but I had
Who blames you for that?
Extended family, but you see, they weren't in my shoes.
No, they weren't helping you either.
No. So I had to do what was best for my parents. I've always put them first. I've always put their needs first, even before mine. So even on my father's last day, he show that I had put their needs before mine, and he had no second thoughts about that. But obviously, the family or the extended family thinks that you're very controlling, and you have to be controlling. You have to be like that, even if you don't like it, for your parents' life to function as normally as possible.
And as well as possible, because we've mentioned this before, we've talked about time. It comes back to that thing again. It's there, it just keeps rolling round, and that's it, because you've got to make sure that everything's done in a certain way in that time frame. Obviously with your dad, it was during the time that was right for him. He could get the best out of what was available. And the same with your mum, because she'll have moments where she's just too tired or fatigued to do certain things, and you've got to be mindful of that all the time before yourself. And then if there's anything left over, Aisha can have that bit. You can have what's hanging around.
Do you mind sharing, and feel free not to if this is too uncomfortable, but what did they think you were over controlling? In what ways was it that they felt that you were controlling or over controlling?
Things like finances, things like which doctors to visit, things like whether it would be feasible for them to travel to another city to attend a wedding. So things like that. And in our culture, the elders get to make these decisions. So, and the males of the family. So all the finances, the logistics, these get looked after by the males. So this was very different coming from me as a female and as the youngest member of the family from both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side. And this wasn't welcoming at all. They thought that spending money on their well-being in the form of physiotherapy, in the form of supplements, in the form of adaptations around the house, they thought that I was just overspending and that money could have been used elsewhere. And I said, no, these need to be done. I particularly remember telling my father that who are you saving this money for? You need to spend it on yourself. You've saved all this money all your life. Now is the time to spend it on yourself. You need to get a really good physiotherapist. You need to, go out and socialize, go out to restaurants that you like, and you need to, spend this money, and we need to go out, and we should be traveling together. So these opinions weren't welcomed by the family, because they thought that, I was behind orchestrating all this. And knowing my parents, they've, I wouldn't say stingy, but they've saved, and they, everything, you spoke about this, this is, a luxury, and, we're going to save this, just stick to the necessities. And when the dynamics shifted with their conditions, I was like, no, I've completed my education, and now is the time to, spend on yourselves.
You introduce that pleasurable part of life to them. Yeah. I think as well, it's kind of it's really too easy in a way for me to assume that a lot of the way that the extended family were thinking is a cultural thing, is what they would have done at home and not expected you to take control. But then if they'd left home and you're on your own, who's going to do it?
Yeah, exactly. You're the one that is actually stepping in to be the carer, but then they don't want you to make those carer responsibilities, decisions. You're stuck between a rock and a hard place, essentially.
So you see, that's how I started. It's identity crisis. I was a carer back then, but then I was the youngest. So there was a constant battle between these two identities, So it was very difficult. It was a very challenging time, and now I just don't give a shit anymore.
Good for you. Yeah, I like it. Yeah. I like it. I think that's great because it's really. It's interesting. It's interesting when there's been that shift in the dynamic, and you have to make the best decision you can and the right decision for that person, and it won't satisfy or please other people, but they don't matter, because what does matter is that you can achieve what you need to achieve for your loved one or the person you're caring for without considering other people's needs, because they're not relevant to it. And I think, I mean, there's lots of things. Caring is a full-time job. It's huge. And there are people out there who care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they do it because they love the person they're caring for. But they're entitled to feel a little bit fed up sometimes and to let go of that. And I think that's really valuable. I think people, I have my moments, and it was a short period of time with my husband when he was diagnosed, but I'm saying a short period of time, 7 years, it's a long time, but it's forever, because obviously it's still a challenge. But I think you don't get a choice in it. You can walk away or wheel away. You can do that, but you're not going to, because you love that person and you want to be there for them in the same way they didn't walk away. They looked after you. And a lot of even in big families, there's the siblings might be close, but they don't necessarily think the same way. So there's always going to be one who does more than the other, and some people who just can't cope. There are lots of people who can't cope, so they're not going to do anything. And that's like kind of, I think it's just an easy way out. I can't cope with that, so I'm not going to face it. I'm not going to do it. But you don't get that choice if that's what you're faced with, do you? You have to do it. Yeah, and people should understand, when you're a carer, they invite you to do things you might not be able to, that you might at the last minute have to say, I'm really sorry, I have to cancel because X, Y or Z. And that can be, this goes back to things we've discussed in past podcasts, is that, it's the spontaneity. Everything's kind of, it's all one big maelstrom, isn't it? All mixed together, and you don't always, it's really, really, really hard.
I think there's two really interesting points in everything that's just been said there. I think what you said, Aisha, about that idea of the identity conflict, where you're their daughter, you shouldn't be parenting them, but you kind of have to, because you've also got to be their carer. And I think so many people struggle with that, from the research that we've done with parent carers who are the primary carer for their children, but their children are going to have lifelong needs. They're never going to sort of transition and leave. We really see that tension in terms that they just want to be a parent, but being a parent also means being a full-time carer, and that carer isn't just someone who is caring in the traditional parent role, the same way that you're not just caring in the traditional daughter role. It's that you're helping them take their meds. They're having to think about sometimes really complex medical conditions, like we were chatting in a previous podcast about tube feeding. So they're having to tube feed, and that can, if that doesn't go right, then it can have a whole host of complications that can be. And I think that's what people don't understand, is actually when you become a full-time carer or an informal carer to a loved one, it isn't just, that you're caring in the traditional sort of familial way, but you're actually sometimes enacting quite difficult medical procedures, and there's no rule, there's no guidebooks, there's no instruction manual. And it's really, I think that's something that people don't understand, and it's that identity conflict, because you just want to still be their loved one, but you have to also be responsible for them in terms of their medical needs and their conditions needs as well. And I think that identity conflict is something that's really interesting.
It's really difficult. It's really difficult, the balance. I've been, as part of being involved in neuro drop-in, obviously I meet lots of different people, see lots of different situations, and some things stick in your mind, of experiences that I've had. I once met someone who introduced himself to me and then introduced a lady who was with him as his carer. And that's exactly what he said, this is my carer. And I just, and this lady's face was just, it was as though she'd been smacked because she was his wife.
Did he forget that she was his wife?
No.
No.
She said, I'm not your carer, I'm your wife first. And it was really hard. But he said, but you have to do everything. And she said, I know, but I'm still your wife. I don't want to be introduced as your carer. It's like, I'm on the payroll. Well, actually, there is no payroll because you're going to do it for free. Yeah. But it's a huge topic. I mean, it would be really remiss if we don't talk about some positive things to do with caring, because there's some brilliant carers out there, people who go to the nth degree, and people for the most part do. Anyone who's caring does care and does a brilliant job, because it's hard work, because you're dealing with, I can remember, as I said earlier, when you get diagnosed with an incurable condition, I thought you got a free pass then for everything else, that nothing was going to happen. Well, that's it, you just cope with that and nothing else will come your way. But it doesn't work like that. And there was a situation, I had an annus cerebralis just like the Queen in 2009, and I fell at home at night and I broke my leg in 2 places, which was horrendous, just awful. And I had to have 18 weeks bed rest with this enormous cast on, so I couldn't get out of bed. And at the time I was able to employ a very good friend of mine as my carer. She didn't try to kill me, but I think she felt like it times because I insisted. I am a bit of I like to cook. And I like my food to be nice, but my friend isn't the best cook in the world. So I thought if we had walkie-talkies, I could instruct her from my bed. So we had these walkie-talkies, only it was like, Graham took the batteries out in the end because I was dreadful. And I would say things to her like, do not use your imagination, just follow the instructions. Don't use your initiative. And she'd start off then, she started off saying, I'm going to cook this and I'm not using my initiative. We are still, she's my best friend, we're great friends. There's no question that, but that period could have been real. But she was wonderful to me, but it was hard. But it was hard for me having a carer. Yeah. As well. Yeah. I didn't like it because I wanted to be independent. So I was lucky. The people who were caring for me understood that, I could be horrible sometimes.
No, but I think we were talking about the identity crisis there of the carer, but actually that's a good point. There's an identity crisis for the cared for. So it's like, for you didn't want that. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to cook your own meals. You wanted to do everything that you had always done, and suddenly that's taken away from you, and you're trying to micromanage that in some way.
Oh, I was, yeah.
And likewise, it was probably the exact same for your parents, Aisha, in terms that they're suddenly having to rely on their daughter to do all that, especially like you were talking about how your dad was so patient and kind and in many ways almost tried to shield you from some of the care practices that he was maybe enacting for your mum when you were younger, and then suddenly he can't do that anymore, and that must have been quite difficult for him and for your mum as well. It's probably still difficult for your mum to.
And she will understand, won't she, that in your culture that wouldn't happen, that the youngest daughter wouldn't be caring.
You see, that's another difference. Because my mum is from Africa, she has this. She's I would say normal. She's like the rest of us, but they moved to Pakistan after she got married to my dad. So while staying in that country, I was staying there, but I didn't fully adapt to the culture. So things like taking on that responsibility, that was very normal for me. And my mum thought that it was not a big deal for a girl to do.
Okay.
Is that because in African culture that would be the norm?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So were you born in Africa?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So when did you move to Pakistan then?
I was born in Nairobi, and then I just left after 3 or 4 months.
Right.
And then we visited every year because my maternal side of the family is in Nairobi.
Right.
So yes, we visited every year because my mom wanted to be with her family.
So what is there a difference between the way your family that have been born and raised in Pakistan approach your mum's condition and the way the family in Africa approach the condition? Is there a difference in that, in the way the carer is considered with those two cultures?
I think this is very, this is something that's grounded in the subcontinent culture, because people from the subcontinent went to Africa and all these countries. So there are some values that they still have in their lives, and mental health, something like mental health or an invisible condition is not taken seriously. Yeah. So people, my relatives, my mum's family who has moved to either the US or the UK, they recognize after being exposed to this particular culture, they recognize that this is something important and you have to be sensitive around it. But when they're visiting, like I said, then when they're visiting back home, or when they're talking to family who is affected by conditions like these, they don't take it very seriously.
So what's their solution then? Someone's got to care. Like, they must recognise that someone's got to care. So what's their solution? Who do they think should do the caring, if not yourself?
Ideally, it should be the son's responsibility. And because it's my responsibility now, it wasn't taken very well in our family. It was hard for my dad to accept that my youngest daughter is doing all this. He was okay with it, but he didn't want the extended family or people outside, like at the doctors or the bank, to know that I was doing everything single-handedly and I was calling the shots. And I used to do it in a way where I valued his opinion. I used to explain it to him that this is my logic, and do you agree with this? And do you have any input? No? Okay, we'll go this way, or we'll follow along this lead. But it was very difficult for him as well to let other people outside the house know that.
Okay, so there was a pride there in him as a man, a father and husband, wanting to keep it within the family, and yet there'll have been that paternal feeling of responsibility and not wanting you to be the one in charge. You have to have that responsibility. What a huge dilemma for you to think through all that stuff, because that's a lot, isn't it, contributing. I mean, I think most families, we get some of what you're saying, people not taking things seriously or not understanding neurological issues. There's an element of that wherever you go in the world. I don't think it's necessarily as severe perhaps as it is within the cultures we've talked about, but I think there is an element of it people don't understand. They're afraid of it as well, and I think that's why when you first get that diagnosis, there's that fear. What does it mean actually? Because it's quite hard when there isn't a definitive pathway in the sense of this is gonna happen to you today, and in 6 months this might happen, and there's none of that. It's a mystery. It's a huge mystery, and it always will be. I mean, we've all got one. We've all got a brain. We don't always use them exactly the same way, but we don't always use all of it either. There's lots of it we're not using, and there's lots of it we don't know about the brain. So it's massive, and I think there's got to be a bit about cultures in there, but I think it's the same, perhaps not quite as bad, but wherever you go, there'll always be people who don't understand and that fear it.
I think it comes back to as well that there's different levels of care, in terms that care is such a huge concept, it's such a huge idea, and the way people care is very different. So culturally there can be different ways of how you see care. Like you were saying that within the African sort of culture, it's more traditional for the females to do that, whereas in Pakistan culture, it's actually that the male or the son should take responsibility for that. But obviously in your situation, there isn't a male son, so it has to be a female. So you've got cultural kind of notions of what care is, but then on top of that, you've got familial kind of ideas of what it means to care, and every family will enact care in different ways. So some families will never hug, but that doesn't mean they don't care, it's just that they show care in different ways. And then you've got kind of paid care versus informal care, care for love. So care is just such a huge notion, and it's really, really difficult then when actually you try to understand care within a sort of neurological or a disabled context, and what that care means, and how it's going to be enacted. It's a really difficult thing to sort of pinpoint in terms of who should care and who. So one of the things that we've seen a lot from the work we've done with parent carers is they're beat with this stick of, well, you're the parent, you should care. But as we spoke about, parental care and medical care for someone with a disability or with a neurological condition, it's chalk and cheese, it's completely different. But the systems don't seem to understand that, or they probably do, but they don't want to recognise that, because the reality is, without getting bogged down in too many statistics, informal carers save the British economy billions every year. So why would they want to try and all of a sudden say, actually, we appreciate that you're doing serious care work for the economy and we're going to pay you accordingly? They're not going to want to recognise that. So you've kind of got this structural, systemic issue as well within the UK in terms of how they appreciate and see the care work that is actually enacted by informal carers, or indeed by paid carers as well. Quite often it's minimum wage for carers who are informal carers. They're paid a pittance every week. They have to jump over hoops to show that they actually should be getting that carer's allowance. Quite often.
I know, and it's peanuts.
Yeah. I think it's less than £70
It's
or maybe
less than £70 a week. 24/7.
24/7, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And quite often as well made to feel like benefit scum then, because it's seen as a benefit, it's not seen as a wage.
And it stops when you retire.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it does. It stops when you retire.
Oh. But you don't retire from being an informal carer?
You don't, no. It stops when you retire. You can claim, I think, for I can't think of the name of what you can claim.
Is that
for.
because your state pension basically overrides? Yeah, because
exactly, and you've got to be included in that. So
one of our informants, she explained that she was a carer but paid at 0 pence, and the reason for that was because her widow's pension was higher, so she can only qualify for one or the other. So they gave her the one that was higher. But she's like, so I'm a carer on paper. I'm down as the legal carer for my grandson, but actually, in fact, I'm not paid for that. And I think this is a complexity that actually a number of people in society that moan and whine and say, oh, they're just taking our benefits and they should be working, really need to understand that carers, informal carers, are working and quite often cannot do the care work that they need to do for their loved ones and hold down a full-time job or even a part-time job. And there's a lack of recognition about what that care role actually entails. And so I think we could go off on tangents about this.
We could. I'm gonna just nip in with there you go again, nipping somewhere. I can nip from I'm seated, so I can nip. I'm just gonna nip in with something about neurodropping, because we do care at neurodropping, and when we establish anything, it is for the benefit of people who are diagnosed and their carers if they want to join in. So we have different groups, and we have carers who will join us for a Tai Chi session or yoga or a bit of, we've been doing knit and chat groups. My knitting's appalling. I'm not getting, still not coping with the knitting, but one of the people who is getting an awful lot out of it is a carer. And she loves the fact that the person who she cares for is off doing something else, and she can do that. And because that's back to that same thing, isn't it? If you're with that person 24/7, we've always thought, or I've always thought as founder of the charity, that the important thing is we focus on one person. It's if we help one person, we've succeeded. It's amazing. But also we think about that one person comes along to the centre and does something that they can then go home and chat about that's different. And that's what I think it can happen when people are at neuro drop-in, that somebody could be doing a yoga session and somebody else could be learning to knit. And when they go home, they can talk about that. That's two very different things, because there's nothing harder than not having anything to talk about, because that's when silences become bigger. And I think that's really hard. So caring, what a lot of the things we do show that we care about other people and try and think about how to help them. We do it with food. If we know that someone has to have blended meals, for example, one of our volunteers some years ago started blending food by colour, and she would take out the meal first and say, this is what you're going to be eating. And so the person, that's what you see, that's what attracts you to a meal, is what it looks like. So you've got that visual, then take it back into the kitchen and prepare it so that person can eat it, but in the colours, so you get the different colours on the plate, not it all mushed together.
Oh, what a beautiful thing to show you care.
Yeah, so it's a meal, and they've already seen what it looked like before, and so that hopefully that image has some kind of level there, and then the taste of the food will be not quite exactly the same, but it won't be too far away from what it looked like. And I think just little things like that make all the difference in the world. And understanding that someone has to have extra custard with their cake, or else they're not going to be allowed to eat the cake because you can't blend it enough, and things like that. So caring can be really positive, and people who care, as we've said, people like you, Aisha, care, are doing a great job. And as Leanne pointed out, the British economy is saving billions because of you and people who do what you do.
And I think that is a really important thing, that the reason why carers or informal carers continue to be carers, don't put their family members into sort of care facilities, is because they care. It's because they love their loved ones. And also, from everyone that I've spoken with who is a carer, not a single one of them say they regret that. They hate the fights that they have to have with the institutions to be able to get and enact the care that they want to enact. But every single person that we have spoken to in our research has always said, it's made me a better person. And I think that is the epitome of someone who cares. Someone who cares is someone who wants to enact that care, but also learns and becomes even more caring in doing so. And I think that that's why people continue to do it. And I hope that's what continues to happen for years to come.
Oh, I hope so, and I think it will. And I just hope that somewhere along the line, if people could see the value in what people like us at Neuro Drop-In do to support people, and start valuing that a bit more and helping us to do it, would be a great thing, because it's always a challenge.
But I think you can do that at Neuro Drop-In because you understand care and you care, and so therefore you try to promote and prioritise and support care in as many ways as you possibly can. And hopefully what this podcast does is for people who maybe don't understand the care system and don't understand what it means to actually care, they might think a little bit more deeply about that and start to care themselves. So hopefully that's one of the outcomes from this podcast. I don't think we're finished talking about care, but I think we'll definitely talk about it in future podcasts. But probably for today, that's enough to bombard people with, maybe.
So you've been listening to Neuro Chatting, and we look forward to you joining us again. Bye bye for now.